Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I'm Sheng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. You can also find my work at NBC Sharks and on Twitter at Sheng_Peng.
I'm Keegan McNally. You can find me on Twitter at halfwall_hockey, my website half-wallhockey.com, or at San Jose Hockey Now. This week, 2 more weeks to the draft, but
Yes.
Sheng, share with us some Combine info.
Yeah, so for our 50th episode of the new San Jose Hockey Now podcast, this is our 50th episode, we're going to welcome back actually our very first guest, Todd Marchant. He's the director of player development and a senior advisor for the Sharks. And we had Todd on to give us an update on every Sharks prospect in the system, not named Will Smith and soon to be Macklin Celebrini. So we wanted to give you the update on the guys that we don't talk about quite as much. So we get updates on Quentin Musty, who I know you guys love, and also even deep. We have an Alex Young signing update, and we get to the most random of Sharks prospects. Who do you think? Who is your most random Sharks prospect that we talked about with Todd?
There's a few. Probably the updates on Timofey Spitserov and his
that's a good
rise
one, right?
through the ranks of UVM's lines. But so we basically go draft by draft and kind of hit on the guys that are not either with the CUDA or that are still with the Sharks in their reserve system to try and get some insights on where they stand and what their future looks like with the Sharks.
Right, we got Eli Barnett update, Joey Muldowney. Those are just a couple names that come to mind for me. But anyway, so we have an exciting week of news.
Yeah, it was a great interview with Todd as always, and you guys should stick around for it. And it's kind of our culmination of about a year. When we get to the draft, it'll be pretty much exactly a year that we've been doing this podcast. But yeah, it was great to have Todd on our 50th episode. So, all right, this week we have a little bit of news. I guess number one that we'll talk about, and Sheng is going to go and give us a lot of updates on it, is the Combine was this week, and Sheng was there in person, live on the ground reporting.
In Buffalo.
In
Underrated
Buffalo.
city, actually. Last time I was here was 2018 during the World Junior Championships. It was a blizzard. I didn't get everything. Everywhere I looked in Buffalo, it was white. And I really actually liked it this time around. The architecture is beautiful. It's great here in the spring and summer.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. We have some Macklin talk. I guess it's not like maybe it'll be Celebrini watch after we draft him, whether or not he signs with the Sharks. We'll call it Macklin Celebrini watch. We have some updates on the head coaching search. We have a very off-the-cuff rumor from Jeff Merrick about signing Jake Gensel to the Sharks. Some updates on a few UFAs and RFAs to be for the Shark system, including Mäkiniemi. And then finally, Joe Pavelski announcing his retirement. We're going to talk about that and whether or not we think that Joe Pavelski is a Hall of Famer, and just share some Joe stories maybe. That's what we got this week and more on the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I stole that from JD. Actually, he's gonna copyright strike me. Anyway, let's start with the Combine because it's like the big buzz of the week, and it was fun to follow your updates as they were put out, and actually everybody's updates on heights, weights, and stats and body fat percentages and all the dumb stuff that we still do for the Combine.
Questions.
Yeah, the weird questions like what's your Uber driver rating or Uber passenger rating?
I actually think that's a good question.
Is it just? It's to have a bad joke. It's the Patty Kane test, you know.
Yeah, I think it's telling. But anyway, I put out a story yesterday. All the buzz I was hearing about the Combine, the players or the prospects that the Sharks interviewed, updates on the coaching search and free agency stuff. And anyway, I just wanted to add that there's actually some stuff. I heard a lot of things over the last couple of days that I forgot. I didn't put into the story. And so I'll sprinkle some of these things, little coaching update stuff, prospect that I initially did not, or I got a late text that this prospect was interviewed, and also free agency update that I forgot, I neglected to mention in my story. So we'll get to that one by one here. But first, let's talk about the Combine and the prospect that I wanted to remind people that. So I have a list of about 20 prospects that the Sharks talked to, and the Sharks said I actually interviewed Sharks director of amateur scouting, Chris Morehouse, and that's a different story. But he said that they talked with 70 plus prospects, and there were 98 prospects invited. So chances are the Sharks talk to a prospect that you care about. That the odds are right.
Mhm.
So I want to emphasize that because I know that everybody's got a man crush on Zeev Buyam, and he wasn't a guy that I could confirm. He wasn't a
Yeah.
guy that I could confirm that the Sharks talked to, but chances are they did talk to him. So not that that's going to matter because I don't think the Sharks are going to have the capital to trade up for him. A couple second round picks isn't enough, even if the Sharks like him enough.
Yeah.
I know that draft value it's enough, but yeah, that's if you want to trade up, you gotta almost always you gotta overpay. If you want to get up to into the, especially into the Zeev William category of the draft or
Yeah.
Zeev,
Now they could do like Vegas's pick plus the 14th if they were super
if they really
like
like him, but
yeah.
that's pretty 2 first round picks. I don't know,
I know it's a lot.
And
I
then yeah,
do
you don't know
love
where that Vegas one's gonna land, right?
yeah.
So, but team would probably take that because the Vegas one, there's a chance that could be. You never know, that could be
Hmm.
a high pick. So I just
There's
wanted to remind people of that in terms of don't get too stressed about the list that I have. That's the best that I can accumulate in a couple of days here, and I'll probably get
mhm.
more names in the next week or so. But yeah, like don't get too worried if you don't see your Zeev Buyam on the list, or I don't know. I'm sure a couple of other guys that I made sure to try to get updates on guys that I kind of saw in the number 14 range. So I specifically went after those. So that's why you see
Yep.
names like Solberg and Brandzik Nygaard and names like that, right?
Yeah.
Yakimchuk maybe. Yurachek, names like that. So I made sure to get those names down to kind of make sure on that, right? Iserman maybe.
I had the
The
opposite reaction than a lot of people. I wasn't mad that there
mm,
wasn't like Zeev Buyam or Sam
mm,
Dickinson or whoever listed or Artem Levshinov or something listed. Like I like those players that you listed in 14. Like there's Kalenius on there, Catton,
mhm.
you said Solberg, there's Yakimchuk, guys that I really like around that 14. Then guys later on like Cole Hudson, Alphonse Frey, um, even Gabriel Eliason,
Right.
Cole Baudouin, all of those. And if you wanted to, yeah,
Yeah,
they're kind of doing a good job of parsing out where they could be in the draft, kind of thing.
but I guess I'll say that if you interviewed 70 plus of 98 prospects, there's going to be a few
Almost
that you probably
everybody.
didn't like. I just maybe just
Yeah.
didn't happen to run into their names. So I want to throw in
Hmm.
another name that I heard though last night, and it's going to be updated into the story, but chances are maybe you won't read the update. Lucas Pedersen, that's another name that I've heard that the Sharks talk
Hmm.
to. So that's yeah, so to add that to the list.
I like Lucas Pedersen a lot. He seems like a very Mike Greer kind of guy. He more of a two-way player, lots of like pace and speed and bit of skill, not like
Mm-hmm.
super overwhelming skill, but like enough for right now. Seems like you're kind of third line energy forward, but
I
not in a
wonder if
bad
he
way.
33-42 might be a little high for him, but who knows?
Yeah, maybe. There's
Maybe.
he's one of the better Swedish prospects. The Swedish league this year wasn't as deep in terms of, well, theoretically, you never know, but in terms of it's not going to be like multiple first rounders like there normally
Mhm.
is, kind of thing. So Lucas Peters is one of the better
Oh, I want to
names.
mention one thing too. People on the
Hmm.
website they took notice that of the names that the Sharks didn't interview, and Trevor Connolly wasn't, and we can kind of guess why.
Yep.
Another name I mentioned was Kevin He, and Kevin
Hmm.
He has nothing. I don't think there's anything terrible about him or whatever. It just so happens that he's not a top prospect, and so
Sure.
the Sharks didn't talk with him at the combine. He talked with 11 teams, I believe. So a lot of teams didn't talk with him. And it's not a reflection on the kid's character or whatever. He just happened to be in the same sentence as Trevor Connolly in my story. So
Yeah.
I wanted to make that correction and clear up any kind of connection or confusion with the Trevor Connolly there. And who knows too? There are a few names of the prospect of the people invited. The Sharks didn't talk to this week, but that they've kept in touch with throughout the year. And I
Hmm.
mentioned that in the story. Mikhail Yegorev, Lucas Morelli. those are a couple of guys that the Sharks have talked to, and so maybe Kevin maybe they talked to him throughout the season for all I know.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
an
just wanted to
interesting.
mention that.
It's an interesting thing. I'm not like always been super impressed with Kevin He. I think his decision making hasn't been up to like a very good standard in terms of.
Mhm.
I think he gives the puck away a lot, and but I mean, I still think he's
I've never
worthy
seen
of a
him
pick
play.
at
I
some
just
point.
wanted to correct that
Yeah.
he and Connolly don't belong in the same sentence.
Oh yeah. No, Kevin He's just like he's good. And there's no like, at least as far as I know either. There's not really any kind
Yeah,
of
he's just more of
issue.
a mid-round guy than a guy
Yeah.
that is going to go in the first like a Connolly, but also doesn't have anything unpleasant associated with him.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's definitely a good thing to put out there. I thought that was interesting in the article too. I was like, okay, they just didn't talk with Kevin He. That's fine.
I just get random names. I mean,
Mhm.
so I just put them all together.
Yeah, no worries.
There's no reason except that I did try to target guys that to find out that could be at 14.
Yeah. Anyway, the let's talk a little bit about this list. So you mentioned at least the list that you have, because that's what we can go off of. Cole Baudouin, Camille Bednarik, Michael Brandisek Nygaard. I'm doing great on these pronunciations right now. Berkeley Catton, EJ Emery, Cole Eiserman, Michael Hayes, Konsta Helenius, Emil Hemming, Jet Luchenko, Julius Mietnin, Marek Vanaker. And EJ Emery should be on the defensive end, but he's listed as a forward. EJ Emery, Gabriel Eliasson, Alphonse Freyes, Cole Hudson, Adam Juracek, Stian Solberg, Veti Vaisiden, and Carter Jakubchuk make up the defense for players that you listed. Anyone stand out on that list that you like or have heard about?
Well, actually, Emil Hemming was a funny one because I actually talked with Emil. I'm not sure. I gotta look back at some of my interviews. I feel like someone name dropped him to me at some point, but I don't know who or why. But I just saw that he was available, and I just was standing around, so I just wanted to talk to him a little bit.
Sure.
And Emil is funny because he started talking about, well, what is the thing that he does the best is his shot. And Emil also happens to be Finnish. And of course, we know the Sharks have a Finnish prospect who is very, very proud of his shot. And so I asked Emil, do you know Kasper Halttunen? And Emil's like, yeah, I know him. And Emil said, or I asked him, well, who's got a better shot, you or Kasper? And Emil's like, well, I think our wrist shots are about the same, but I think otherwise my shot is better.
Ooh.
And I told Emil, well, I'm going to tell Kasper that. And
Mhm.
Emil's like, yeah, go tell Kasper. I have that all on tape, by the way. I'm not making any of this up. So I just thought that was fun. That was a funny exchange. I don't really have impressions. Like I said,
He has a good shot.
yeah.
But
So
I
I
think
don't know.
Haltonen's
Maybe
better.
he falls 33, 42, right? In the long run. Though I've also heard maybe he's a late first rounder, right? Actually, like Kasper Halton, right? So he's kind of seems to be destined for about the same place in the draft as Kasper was. Kasper went, I think, 36 to the Sharks. But anyway, though, I don't really have any particular like I said, they talked with 70 plus names. So I don't know if this is such a big giveaway because it's a lot of names. I can say that talking with Chris Morehouse that they still haven't finalized their list. And so I'm sure these interviews will play some part in it. I'm sure they have a rough list at this point. And then interviews maybe can move guys up a little bit, move guys down a little bit. Combine results can move guys up a little bit, move guys down a little bit. So I don't really have a great sense of it. And I want to emphasize again that the list not having top defensemen like Lashunov and Bouya and guys like that, probably Sharks did talk with them. It's just that I didn't bother chasing down that information because they're not going to be there at 14. That was what I was most interested by. So,
yeah. I'm happy they interviewed Jet Luchenko. I love Jet Luchenko. I'm going to talk about that until they draft him, basically. But I think he goes in like the 20s anyway. But
yeah.
I like this list. It's very. I mean, again, they talked to 70 guys, so it doesn't
They
really
are
matter.
70
But
guys.
it doesn't really matter.
A lot of guys
but,
that you didn't like that they
Yeah.
talked to too. So
I know. There's a lot of guys that fit different molds of a player, and I think that's interesting. Like the Sharks they're targeting different molds and guys that could fit in those roles, right? Like you couldn't find a different player between like Cole Hudson and Gabriel Eliasson, right? Like they're two completely different players, and it's cool that they're open to both. Maybe I'm reading a lot into nothing until we get to the draft.
Yeah, I'm sorry. To be honest. Again, this is a list of 20 out of 70. So,
oh well, draft speculation is too much fun anyway. All right, before we move on, anything else about the combine? Any other buzz that you heard? I mean,
not at
except
the
for all the
moment,
chatter.
but something might come up. Like, oh yeah, I heard that, and I'll tell you next week on a podcast.
Sure.
Where I'll put in the story. I honestly did pick up enough information. Like I said, I forgot some stuff in my story. It's like, oh, I should have put that in there because I
Yeah.
did learn it over the last couple of days. So, well,
We have an interesting twist on the Macklin Celebrini saga. He's been asked like, I don't know, 16 times whether or not he's going to sign with the Sharks or go back to college for a year. It seems like it's every question. They're like, what are the benefits of going back to college? What are the benefits of going back to the Sharks or going to the Sharks? And he's kind of giving the answers of these are the things that I could do if I went to college, and he hasn't decided. That's kind of where he's landed, right?
mm-hmm.
But I guess there's a big but there. What do we both expect is going to happen?
He's coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Will
feel
Smith
it too.
said it was up in the air like 2-3 weeks after Will Smith had basically decided.
Mm-hmm.
And Will Smith, as we noted as we learned in our interview with Sean Coffey, his agent last week, there are reasons why Will didn't want to become a big story at the World Championships.
Mm-hmm.
Also, too, Will's sister was about to graduate, so he didn't want to take the spotlight from her. So Will had good reasons to kind of keep it under wraps. In this case, with Macklin, he's not actually with the Sharks yet. He's not with the NHL team yet, as he repeated to me when I asked him if it would be the last time that last month would be the last time we'd ever see him cheer for the Canucks.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah, probably, but I'm not with the NHL team right now. And so I was just sort of enjoying kind of being a fan for the last time is essentially what he said. So anyway, everything that I've heard, that this is a kid that is always looking for the next challenge. The college game has, especially for him, there's even more of a debate for Will Smith that there's no challenge in the college game for Macklin.
Mm-hmm.
His head coach at Boston University, Jay Pandolfo, in a story I did about a month ago or so, said straight out that he believes that Macklin could step in on a playoff team right now and be like a fourth line center, maybe a third line center.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a center on a winning team. He's defensively responsible enough. He's physically mature just enough. He's still just 17. Let's not forget that. But
yeah.
So yeah, he's coming out. This is just talk. So I'd be shocked. I mean, it's possible, of course, until he says I'm coming out, of course, until he signs on the dotted line, just like Will Smith, right? That I was telling you guys for a couple months that let's just say that this is a very educated guest talking with people around Celebrini.
Yeah.
That this is what I gather from them, that there is not a belief that he is going back. Everyone believes he's coming out.
My impression, and this is just my impression, is that he's a kid that like he's grown up in a professional hockey or professional athlete environment since he was very young.
Sure.
He's very coached on how to answer questions, and it's like being the night before your big test and being like, oh, am I going to go to bed early or am I going to go have like 12 beers? Like he's basically answering the right questions, right answers up until the test. Like,
yeah,
he knows like the wrong answer is, oh no, an NHL team better sign me because I'm ready and I need to play in the NHL. That's the wrong answer for the presumptive first overall pick. The right answer is, yeah, if I went back to college, these good things could happen. If I come out, these good things could happen. Like, the right answer is to be open-minded in terms of what a team would want. And he knows that. And I think also maybe he hasn't really, like, once you're drafted, there's like a lot of players mention this. There's like a moment when you're like, oh, I'm like, this is it. This is the big moment. Like, it has to dawn on him after he's drafted that like the next step is there. So,
I don't know. I mean, there's different ways he can answer it. I mean, he could say that it depends on whoever drafts me, but yeah, I'm likely coming out. I mean, there's some ways he can say it, but he's been pretty consistent in terms of what he has said publicly.
Yeah.
And so he hasn't deviated from that, but he's coming out.
I would say so too. I think we can both put our prediction, but we will have Celebrini watch over and over again.
Sure.
The MCW, the Macklin Celebrini watch.
Oh, yeah, sounds
Yeah.
like MCU, MCW, but
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see if it changes. There are a couple weeks left to the draft. If I hear anything different, but I'll
Mhm.
tell you, I've heard nothing that makes me think for a second. Even with Will Smith, there was a little bit of, well, his buddies are still there, and
Sure.
defensively, his game is still needs work, and maybe he could use that extra year of building up his body more so than Celebrini could use it too, because Celebrini is just
Sure.
17, but Celebrini is more physically mature than more ready for the NHL physically than Will Smith, even though he's younger than Will.
Mhm.
So there are some reasons for Will Smith, but I those reasons don't exist for Celebrini.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's just got to dawn on him, and then he's going to have a conversation with Mike Greer, and he'll be like, I think you're ready, and they'll probably agree, and I think he'll sign
And
sometime
that'll
soon.
be it. Oh, another
Yeah.
thing with Will too is Will loves Boston College. Will, I think multiple generations of his family have gone there. That's
Yeah.
why Will wears number 2, because his dad loved Boston College alum Brian Leach, who wore number 2. Will is too young. Will never watch Brian Leach play.
Yeah.
But so there's that too. That Will missed out on national championship with Boston College, and that matters to Will. I think that does matter to
Mhm.
Will. Macklin Celebrini is from Vancouver. He doesn't national championship is nice, but I don't think
Yeah.
he cares about winning a Stanley Cup. He cares about winning
He's already won like the
Hart
Hobie, right?
Trophy. Yeah, he's already won the Hobie. So
It's like Smith
yeah,
could
it's
theoretically go
not the
back
same thing.
to be like, I got to win the national championship and the Hobie Baker
I
and all
want to
that stuff, and like,
try. Yeah,
yeah. So I think Celebrini's just kind of done, and plus Lane Hudson's leaving, so like if he went back, he'd be without like his best offensive defenseman at BU. So I mean, like I don't know, I wouldn't see a good
there
fit
just
to go
isn't
back.
really much of an argument. Not that much.
Mhm.
It's okay if he did choose to go back. It'd be fine. He'd be just even more ready when he ever comes to the Sharks, be it at the end of next season in April
Sure.
or the beginning of the 2025-26 season. But
Hmm.
he's the one thing I did learn from him that I thought was amusing was that he said that he had never been to a Sharks game, which I thought was crazy because even though I know the connection with the Sharks and the Junior Sharks is a little bit overplayed because
Hmm.
he only played for the Junior Sharks for 1 year, and I think he only lived in the Bay. Macklin himself only lived in the Bay Area for that 1 year.
Yeah.
Otherwise, then he went to Shattuck, and before that, he was in Vancouver. So kind of that hometown connection with San Jose, it's not really like a
Yeah.
hometown kid. I just thought that was surprising. I just would have figured with the Junior Sharks that he just would have gone to a game, but he
Yeah. At some
didn't.
point.
And so anyway,
Yeah.
the first game he plays at SAP Center is going to be his first is going to be his first game his first game as a Shark is going to be
Hmm.
his first game at SAP Center, which I just think is crazy. So
It's kind of fun.
it is fun, yeah.
Yeah. We won't count the preseason games.
Right.
We're only going to count the regular season games. All right. The other big news is I guess he's 5'11" and 3/4 instead of 6 foot.
Right.
So he's clearly going number 2
That was
instead of number 1.
that was funny. I was filming his height weight measurement. And I could see him just like he looked like a mock frustration, but he was a little annoyed. And I saw up on the board Macklin Celebrini 5'11" and 3/4. Like, oh, that's why. And that's why I asked him about it
Stretch
30
your neck a
minutes
little bit.
later
Just
in
stretch your
the
neck a little
post.
bit, but just stretch your
Yeah,
neck a little bit.
post workout interview.
That's really funny. Um, it's and the height thing is always a big discussion every year. Like Zeke Williams,
Round
exactly
up
6 foot.
6 foot,
Yeah,
so he's fine.
he's fine.
Del Zeeb, I
Uh,
guess, is a legitimate 6 foot though.
exactly 6 foot. Um, which I think it matters a little bit more for Zeke to be 6 foot than it does for Macklin to be 6 foot.
Uh,
Really.
I don't think if Zeeb measured out at 5'11" 3/4, I don't think a quarter of an inch is gonna matter that much
Nah.
offensively. If it's like a
Yeah.
legit inch or two, okay, fine. But yeah, a quarter of an
Yeah.
inch, I think they're fine. Either of them are fine. It's
Wonder
just that
how
Zeeb
long.
just has bragging rights, at least for now. Macklin can
Mhm.
still grow, obviously.
Okay, let's move on to the head coaching search because I think last week we didn't really touch on it all that much, and we have a few finalists question mark to report on
Yeah,
possibly.
it seems like we're headed down there.
Hmm.
So on Wednesday, I had three sources tell me that I kept hearing Warsawski,
Hmm.
and one of them told me that he thought that Ryan was a front runner or the front. I think
Sure.
it was a front runner was the language used. And another source did tell me though that he thought that it was Warsawski and Sturm
Hmm.
in it. And someone else told me Warsawski again. So I was like, okay, so that's sort of where we're going. Maybe leaning a little Warsawski, maybe. And so I put out a story to that effect. And over the last
Sure.
couple of days, I've learned that Sturm is still very much in it. And I mentioned that in my story. I don't remember the exact quote, but and Elliot Friedman, I think, put out a podcast on Friday, I think it was, and he mentioned
Hmm.
that he had been hearing Sturm and Warsawski. And he
Mm.
also had mentioned that Jeff Blasho, got a second interview too. So it sounds like most of the buzz, there's a little Blasho, but it sounds like most of the buzz seems centered around Sturm or Warsawski.
Hmm.
And so I think I would guess that's where we're headed. And I would say I don't know this for a fact, but just reading the tea leaves that Mike Mike Greer has been at the combine this entire week.
Hmm.
And that's a little unusual. Most of the GMs leave earlier, so but he's been here from Monday to yesterday.
Sure.
And so anyway, you're not going to have an announcement of your new coach when your GM is at the combine, right?
Mm.
And so I think that next week or the week out, any time before the draft, I think that we are going to get a coach for the Sharks because you
Hmm.
need a coach before free agency. You need to tell a free agent who he's playing for. I think. So I would. It sounds like again that they've narrowed it down a bit here.
Hmm.
And so a couple of notes I did want to add to all this though, that the Sharks never interviewed David Carle. I know I've been mentioning that in various stories, but I made a final check of it because I know that he's been a popular candidate among fans for a good reason. Two national championships there for him. Popular candidate among fans. And also, too, I think last week there was a story that David Carle did have an interview or have a serious talk about an NHL head coaching job with one team. And I don't know what team that was. I
Hmm.
didn't find that out, but I do know that wasn't the Sharks. So I want to
Hmm.
add that. Number two, I see it a lot and I get asked a lot. Oh, another name too, actually, that I know I've been asked about. I don't think they ever talked with Joe Ward. Could
Mm.
be I don't know why. It could be experience thing because Joel has just a
Sure.
couple years as assistant coach, never been
Yeah.
a head guy somewhere, so that could be why. But another note I wanted to add too on all of it is people ask me, well, why not someone more experienced? I think Jay Woodcroft is the big name that I hear. Todd McClellan, I've heard that. And of course, I gave a Todd McClellan update a couple weeks ago in a story that I know that Mike and Todd did actually talk very early on in the process.
Hmm.
And I think that their kind of aims didn't align. And
Sure.
this is going to, how do I say it? This is relevant to all the other big names that you can think of. And I don't know this
Yeah.
for a fact, but I know that the aims didn't align. I do know that for a fact. And we can guess what that means. That Todd is a very experienced coach that wants to win.
Yep.
Mike is looking for a coach that can come in at the sort of the ground floor of a rebuild. Like the last couple of years, have been like tearing down the guts of the place, the foundation. Now they
Hmm.
finally have a first floor here, a decent looking first floor with
Yeah. They got
Macklin and
some
Will
beams
Smith.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, they got
They
some
got good.
beams up, right? Some really good beams up, right? so, some good American steel, and I guess Canadian steel, Macklin
Yeah.
Celebrini. But anyway,
Yeah.
they got some good beams up here finally, which they didn't necessarily have last year. Not as much so, right? No discredit
Yeah.
to
Last
William
year was on
Macklin
fire.
Yeah,
the whole
last year
building
was
was on
tough
fire.
though. Last year was tough, and William Macklin survived the the fire. So good
Mhm.
on you, William. But anyway, though, so Mike is looking for a different kind of head coach, right? And so a guy like, I don't know this for fact specifically about Woodcroft, then, right? But Woodcroft is a guy that he's been to the conference finals. He is on the younger side, so maybe he would be embrace kind of a rebuild thing, or maybe he wants to win, right? And this is what someone pointed out to me, not specifically about Woodcroft, but for a guy like that, or a guy more experienced guy, right? We can go down the line too. This isn't just a McClellan Woodcroft thing, and neither of them were hired in this coaching cycle. The Sharks head coaching job is the last one available. Gerard
Mhm.
Gallant is another one, more experienced guy. Obviously, Gerard Gallant has been to a final, has been to conference finals, right? Couple Jack Adams awards. So guys like that, though, could see, point might be made. Well, there's only so many head coaching jobs. Why don't you jump on the last one available? But guys with this kind of experience and pedigree and near championship experience. So actually, I think Woodcroft and McClellan have rings from Detroit when they were there as assistants or video coaches or whatever, right? But that's neither here nor there. The point is that these guys are good candidates mid-season. If you're a
Sure.
talented team and you're struggling, that then who you're going to hire, you're probably going to bring on somebody. Good chance, not always the case, as we saw with Chris Knobloch, but a good chance that you might bring on somebody that has a track record for getting the best out of players at an NHL level.
Yeah.
And so that could be more attractive than just jumping on a rebuild situation and needing to kind of commit yourself to a rebuild situation. And so I think the point of all of it, just to wrap up, is that there's got to be. You can mention all these big names. Oh, why don't the Sharks hire this big name, that big name, right? That both sides have to be on the same page on it.
Mhm.
So this incoming head coach has to be on the rebuild page with Mike Greer, and vice versa. And so I just wanted to remind people of that. That's not as simple as just looking at the most successful coaches out there that don't have a job. And I've, like I said, mentioned them: Gallant, McClellan. I'm sure I missed Woodcroft. I'm sure I missed a couple guys too. And just hiring that guy. It's not
Yep.
not that simple.
I wouldn't see the point. Maybe if, a couple years from now, sure, but I just
If
don't
they
see it
want to
for
play
now.
along with it, that's fine. If a Gerard Gallant wants to kind of change what he's done and be like, yeah, you know what, I'm happy to be part of a
Hmm.
rebuild. I want to be here the next couple of years, and I want to people talk about this a lot. Who's going to be the Sharks' next coach after this rebuild coach?
Yeah,
Maybe it would be a guy like that has had the track record of
exactly.
going far, but the guy has to really want to be here for the ground floor, and that's my point.
I like both of the theoretical finalists, Morsovsky and Sturm, so I'm going to be
Mm.
happy either way. I think it'll be a good hire um, either way and something to kind of start fresh. And I agree, they need to get it done probably the next week or two before the draft,
Yeah,
maybe even before the draft.
yeah. This actually leads to our next topic, because I think that the
Hmm.
Sharks will be active in free agency, and the free agent needs to know who he's playing for.
Yeah, Jake Gensel's got to know. Is he? So Jeff Merrick, honestly, Friedman and Merrick, they obviously have a lot of. I think there just needs to be a disclaimer on like the level of rumor for Friedman and Merrick, like some
Speculation. What is
speculation.
speculation? What is
Yeah,
rumor? And what is I know? And
exactly.
obviously, both those guys have a ton of sources. So when they say I know, then they know.
Yeah,
When they say it's a rumor, that also has more sort of weight, because they
when they
have
say
more
I
sources.
wonder, they're just kind of
But
thinking.
when they're just kind of wild speculation,
Yeah,
and they and I'm not I'm we're not I still use them in all my
yeah,
stories, because they are so connected, and they are very clear with it. I don't know if fans understand that
the
kind of
difference.
yeah, how they differentiate. They seem to get mad at them, or for me, for kind of redistributing their speculation slash rumors slash reports, right? I try to be very careful by giving the right header to what the
Hmm.
story is. So I have speculation headers, I have report headers, and whatever, right? But anyway, though, yeah, Jeff Merrick it started with Elliot Friedman giving I guess with what Elliot seems more convinced about Chicago making a run at Jake Gensel.
Yep.
So if you listen to their podcast, so that sounded like it did border onto rumor, not like he knows, but like he just talking with people, whatever, right?
Yep.
And then Merrick responded that, well, why not San Jose and Jake Gensel, right? And
I'm gonna say
well,
no. I
well,
I
there's
don't
a
think it's a good I don't think it's a good fit right now.
it isn't. The timeline doesn't quite make sense if Jake wants a 7-year contract or an 8-year contract. They do one of those trades, right? Trades for his rights kind of things, right?
Sure.
Jake Gensel's 29. But there's also the possibility too that look, if Jake Gensel is willing to take a shorter contract, high AAV contract, that would be outstanding. Then okay. We talked about that in our off-season early off-season plan episode about a month ago. Like if Stamkos is willing to take, say, 2 years, high
Sure.
AAV to come over, okay, that'd be great. If Brady Shea is willing to do something like that, 2 years, $20 million, some AAV that he'll never likely ever see, then let's do it. The Sharks have plenty of space. They have space to spare. So that would be fine. But typically though, guys at this point, they want their maximum, they want their security, right? And yeah, that's a big part of this. Just doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense for Jake, really. That does he want to tie the rest of his career, the better part of his 30s, the last of his prime, to a not very good team?
Yep.
And also for the Sharks, it just doesn't make sense, because when Celebrini and Smith leave their ELCs, and you might have to pay him big money, that you have a 34, 35-year-old guy making $9 million or something on your roster, and you're hoping that he's still a 30, 40-year-old guy, but you really don't know.
Jake Gensel's a great player, but he's also had a lot of miles logged already for a guy who's like 30. I mean, like he's played in multiple playoffs. He's, been playing full seasons since 2016. I don't think that he's the right fit for the Sharks. Like exactly like you said, there's no reason for him to tie up like the next 3 or 4 years that are going to be his prime point producing years with the Sharks. And Sharks are not going to be good in time to make full use of him, and he's going to be so damn expensive, so it doesn't make sense.
I mean, it's worth checking in. Like I said, if he's willing to take like a 3-year contract, even a 4-year contract, and you just give him $10 million a year, that of course, I think to me, everything is about just the term. We don't know how much term that Gensel wants, or he's willing to. Maybe he wants one more payday in terms of one more crack at free agency. So maybe he would take a short term. Who knows? Elliot Friedman speculated that Gensel, Midwest guy, maybe Chicago would be appealing to him. And also, too, I thought about it. Gensel has won Stanley Cups with the Penguins, so maybe he's not so single-minded and I must win a Stanley Cup. So all those things are, I mean, you never know. It's possible. But yeah, certainly, though, I think we can agree, though, that anything that's close to a maximum deal for a 29-year-old winger, as good as he is doesn't make any sense for the Sharks.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. But Draisaitl, that's the one next year. I don't know. I just don't see it. But maybe I do appreciate the pickup of San Jose related rumors, at least in the national media.
Slightly more sensible thing about Draisaitl is just that we'll have a year to see if Celebrini and Smith are, say, as good as Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane were in their rookie season. Kane won a Calder. Toews was third in the Calder voting, and Toews was already all situations monster, right?
Yep.
Then maybe you make that jump, kind of like Chicago signing Marian Hossa right around. I mean, Hossa could have been a year. I think Hossa was the year after. Yep. But nonetheless, though, that like there's something there that, okay, if we over invest in a guy, it just might pan out, because we know that Celebrini already, we've seen he's a 1C, and we've seen that Will Smith is a first line winger or second line or whatever, right? So if we see that evidence next year, then that changes sort of the calculation, maybe. But if Celebrini struggles, like Steven Stamkos did his first year, if Smith struggles like Joe Thornton did his first year, or along those lines, right? Then they're not
Pump the
ready. They're not
brakes.
ready
Yeah.
they're not ready for that kind of investment yet. So I think it kicks it, another year down the line, it might make sense. But
Hmm.
overall though, I guess the message is that I'm getting from all this though, and I've heard this from many, many people, that the expectation is that the Sharks are going to try to be better next year.
Yep.
That everyone says they need to insulate Celebrini and Smith. And so I think that they know they had to do that. So I think it's going to be a big test for Mike Greer to see if he can make the right decisions, kind of, to insulate these kids.
Hmm.
And I think it's going to be a big test for him. I'm going to write about that a bit later. And also, too, actually, just speaking of, it's not really related, not a name that is in the Genso Hosa Draisaitl category. But since we're talking about free agency, something I forgot to mention at the combine, I think we kind of knew this was going to happen, but I don't think that Etu Makaniemi is coming back to the Sharks, which is unfortunate because I think he's a pretty talented goalie, and
Yep.
he's a really, really, really nice kid, really good kid. I've always liked dealing with him, but I think it's just sort of a numbers game, and he was hurt so much over the last couple of years, and they need to get somebody that I think is a little more reliable as sort of their third NHL goalie behind Blackwood and Vanacek, i.e., their third NHL goalie slash Barracuda starter kind of guy.
Yep.
And so yeah, I'm fairly certain that he is done in the Sharks organization.
And I guess on that same vein, it sounds like they're trying to maybe bring back Bailey and Carpenter, and
Right. I mentioned
likely
that in my story.
Brandon
Yeah.
Coe as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And Todd is going to talk about Brandon Cohen in the interview coming up.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's, yeah.
And that kind
Read my
of,
story on Combine Buzz. So there's a little more on
yeah.
that in there.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense though in terms of Makiniemi. They need a more reliable goaltender. They have Krona and Romanov to kind of battle it out as the younger goalie in the system to try and reach up the ranks. And then they need to get another goalie. They just need to get somebody who's more experienced and is going to help the Barracuda a little bit more.
Just more reliable. I think the health is a big part of it. If Makiniemi had stayed healthy, I think
Yep,
he's good enough to
reliable is
to,
the
to be in
issue.
that role. I think he's talented enough for that role, but just
Yeah.
couldn't rely on him.
And after we talked with Todd, it seemed like they were interested in going after Coe for a couple of reasons, which you guys should listen to
Yeah.
because he had some good insights. Anyway, good interview. We have one more topic for today.
Hmm.
Captain America, Captain Joe Pavelski, is retiring from the NHL. Likely, I mean, he kind of just said, "I think it's done," or I don't remember his exact
He
quote.
said it
Or
wasn't like the like final, but that the plan, that's the word I think that's the word he used. The plan is for him not to play next year.
yeah,
And I think that's been the plan for a while, I think.
he he's been so good for so long that I think it just was the tiniest little cracks in the Joe Pavelski perfect armor were starting to hit this
You could see
playoff.
that in the
Yeah,
playoffs, yeah.
it
I think it
wasn't.
reminds you of Joe Thornton.
Yeah, that's it's a great
Like, you just
comp.
get a little bit slower, and
Yep.
there's a certain point when you get slow enough, I think, that
Yeah.
all the stuff that you could do that compensated for your lack of foot speed early in your career doesn't do it anymore. Just a little bit, you just lose maybe that half step, right?
Yeah.
And like Jumbo did from 2018-19 to the rest of his career, and Pavelski maybe in the playoffs.
Yeah. And that's kind of sad.
Mm.
Super close a bunch of times to the cup, and never really could do it, and was helping a really good Stars team that is trying to turn over to their younger guys. And he was
Mhm.
just kind of like a very stable presence in their top six, and it's sad to see him go. I love Joe Pavelski. There was one game, I don't remember when this was, maybe 2018, 2019, when Sharks were losing, and then like the third period, he just kind of willed his way into 2 or 3 goals and took the Sharks to overtime. And it was just, I don't know. Like every time Joe Pavelski got a fire lit under him, and then obviously like the Vegas run with him being injured, and I don't know. It felt like it was a different Sharks team when Pavelski was captaining the Sharks team. It felt like a team that knew its direction and really, really um, took after the mold of Joe Pavelski, and they worked hard, and they a team of upstarts in some way. And I really love Pavelski, and he also was a model of like the Sharks for a while in terms of they had really good late round picks. They had
Hmm.
guys that like came out of nowhere, and he was
Right.
among the best, if not one of the best seventh picks
I mean, he was
ever.
the best of that, though they did have a lot of guys come out from there. Yeah.
And it's sad to see the way that he left San Jose, and it's not anybody's fault other than maybe some they kind of gambled on Evander Kane being more of a stabilizing force and younger than Pavelski, and it it was just funny. Like they're gonna, I don't know. Pavelski had so many good years left in him that they didn't anticipate, and that sucks because they really
Yeah.
could have helped some bad Sharks teams. But it is what it is. Sharks needed to turn it over regardless, but the way he left made me always a little sad.
Of course, of course. I think the Sharks had a belief, and it worked for a long time to their credit, but that they can kind of put everybody in their ecosystem, anybody in their ecosystem, and they
Hmm.
would be able to turn that person around. And someone reminded me that Chichu as a draft pick wasn't necessarily seen as the what there were questions about that sort of thing, and they certainly turned Chichu around, right? And he had
Yeah.
incredible career. But then Evander Kane in 2017 and Ryan Merkley in 2018, sort of that. And I've made this joke a lot with a lot of people that, that meme out there, I can fix her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the Sharks kind of thought that they could fix anybody, maybe, and they could put anybody in their ecosystem, and that person
Yeah.
would fall in line. And I mean, granted, with Kane, for a couple of years, it did. I think it did work, but that's when they had Jumbo around and Pavelski around and all that kind of stuff, right? And when those guys started leaving, then it didn't work. But yeah, I think we can there's still more conversations we can have about just how much of an impact Joe had when he left.
Yep.
And I don't think it's as straightforward as sort of the narrative. Like, I know you look at the standings, right? Playoffs with Joe, no playoffs with Joe. I don't think it's quite that
No,
simple.
it's not.
But I don't want to get into that right now. But it just has an appreciation for Joe, that he was always great to deal with.
Mhm.
And he also is. You have to love his story of the guy that came from the seventh round of the draft, and he just worked and willed his way
Yep.
into being who he was. And t- th- just the stories you hear of course, being the first to practice early in the morning, working on tipping shots with Brent Burns, right?
Yeah.
And also just the example that he set in the locker room for everybody,
Hmm.
and maybe sort of the magnetism of his leadership that people just followed, kind of. And so, yeah, a great story. And it is unfortunate that he is not going to win a Stanley Cup, and he's going to have that record as the player with the most games most playoff games without a Stanley Cup. And it's not a deserved record, because if you look at Joe Pavelski, even compared to Patrick Marleau and Joe Thornton, there was never any question about sort of Pavelski's sort of playoff cojones.
Effectiveness. Yeah.
Right.
He's
And there were questions about, honestly, if we look back on it, on Jumbo
Yep.
and Marlowe, right? Never a question of Joe
Many questions.
Pavelski. Joe Pavelski just is a guy that just happened to be sort of on the wrong teams more than anything for not winning that Stanley Cup.
He's also so versatile. Like Joe Pavelski was a guy that was like he stepped into the 3C role for a while and was like
Right.
just rounded out a really good third line. Then he was like stapled to Jumbo's wing as like a good sniper. Later on in his career, he's like tipping shots. Like he did that forever, but like that was his bread and butter was, net front tipping. So he's just a guy that evolved his game so many times over his, very long career because he's just such a smart hockey player. He's
He's
the
a winning
epitome
player,
of
great
hockey
two-way
IQ. Yeah,
player. Yeah.
epitome of hockey IQ in a nutshell. And it's a sad day when the league doesn't have him anymore. So that's about it. That's what I'm sad about. This is, I guess, the biggest question is Pavelski a Hall of Famer? People are going to ask that question a bunch. It was asked of Thornton. It was asked of Marlowe when they retired. Is Pavelski a Hall of Famer as opposed to those two guys, which I think both of them are, yes, in my mind. But
Both are going in.
yeah, I would say Pavelski is in the Hall of Very Good. I don't think that he has enough individual awards or seasons league in goals or points or Stanley Cups or anything that really kind of makes him, other than I love him to death, in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I haven't dug really deep into it, but I think that I'm open to hearing his case from people, but from fans. But I think that I'm with you. I don't think that he quite makes it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's not what Sharks fans want to hear on
Yeah.
on a Sharks podcast, but I don't think he quite makes it.
Yeah.
But he is a guy, though. Like I said, there is a lot of circumstance there, right? There are guys that are in the Hall of Fame that maybe had not even a maybe, we're just on better teams kind of, and teams that won the Stanley Cup, and that's part of their resume.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe very well could have been that player. He just didn't have sort of didn't win that Stanley Cup, didn't get that gold medal, right? And
Yep.
but you don't look at Joe Pavelski being a reason why those teams. I mean, he was always a plus for any team that he was on, be it the Sharks, the Stars, or Team USA. But not having that hardware definitely does matter. Not having
Yeah.
that MVP that Joe Thornton has and that long track record of production, not having Patrick Marleau's longevity.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think he is going to fall just short, unfortunately. And I know that the names. I was looking at hockey reference similarity scores, like a guy like Mark Recchi is in the Hall of Fame,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say that I would probably take Joe Pavelski as a player in most cases than even Mark Recchi. Mark Recchi was a really
Probably.
great player, by the way, in his prime. But Mark is helped by longevity and production, and also winning some Stanley Cups. And I don't put that on Joe not winning those cups, that gold medal, but he doesn't have it, and that's sort of the point, and that's what voters kind of decide on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think he's gonna fall short, but I'm welcome to hearing the case. The okay, I'll look more into it. Maybe there is a case if I
Yeah.
look harder into it, or maybe one of you guys will tell me why he should be in the Hall of Fame. But
Yeah.
right now, yeah, I think he is just a little bit short for me.
If he gets inducted, then I'm not going to be mad about it. I'll say that. But
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think he will. But I won't be mad
yeah.
because I love him.
I mean, Alfredson's in a Hall of Fame.
Sure. But I
Alfredson
think he
had a couple peak seasons,
Okay.
but
I think he also had some more international success too, right?
yeah. I don't know. So I mean, but if all your cases are look at these weak ass guys who made the Hall of Fame, or not weak ass, but weaker ass guys that made the Hall of Fame, that's not much of an argument, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably top 5 in American scoring, right? Like, or I actually don't know where he is in terms of that, but he's probably one of the best scoring for 7th rounders ever, if that helps.
Right, but that's not a case
None
being
of them
like
are.
underdog guy.
Yeah,
Ronick is another guy that is out of the Hall of Fame that maybe should be in there. Kachuk too, Keith
sure.
Kachuk. So those are the kind of guys that he's sort of gonna be maybe lumped in with. And he doesn't have the stats of those guys, but I think he does have more of the leadership intangible aspect, and then either Ronick or Kachuk. So that
Yeah,
will help. That will help Joe that way, but I still don't know if it's quite enough. Mm.
but either way, I mean, I don't want to keep dunking on Pavelski because I do think that
It's
he and
not a
we're
dunk.
not dunking. I know, but
No, we're
to
not.
turn it
It's
around to
not
a
a
more
dunk.
positive sense is
It's just being objective. He was an incredible player. I will say that all those names that we just mentioned that he's in the category of, that I
yeah.
take Joe on my team over all those guys at their best.
Maybe
And
Ronick, I
granted,
think would be it's tough though.
well, granted, at their yeah, Ronick was pretty special his first few seasons in Chicago. That's true.
Yeah,
But I guess I would say, yeah, that's true. That might be a bit wilder to say over Ronick in his prime, at least, right?
yeah.
But I
But
would say
over the other
that
guys,
Joe did a lot of things that again, not on the score sheet kind of guy. He wasn't as flashy as a
Hmm.
lot of these guys, right? But he was a better winning player than a number of these guys, and he just didn't happen to win the big one in the end.
And we always have Joe Pavelski to remember the playoff run with the cat.
Sure.
I love Joe.
But yeah, the Sharks would do anything that they can to bring Joe back to the organization in some capacity. But I think the Stars think of him as in the same way too, and he's now settled in Dallas. So chances are, if he does take a front office job, it sounds like it would be in Dallas, which is unfortunate. But the Sharks should be on the phone with him right now, trying to talk him into coming back.
Yeah, I wonder what he does in the future, in terms of in hockey, what role he settles into, more of like development or scouting or front office. It's going to be interesting.
He seems like he could be a very solid front office guy, coach, some type of coach, be it development or eventually. I could see him being a head coach too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Always had that vibe.
Hmm.
Great locker room guy, and then like it just kind of speaks again to the culture of the San Jose Sharks that was for about 15 years there. That he was a huge part of it, a
Yeah,
very very big part, and they
absolutely.
are still. That's the one bit of magic that Greer has to reinvent in San Jose is that
Hmm.
culture,
That
and
team
it's
building and that sort of thing. Yeah, no doubt, no doubt, no doubt. But
so.
yeah, but for sure though, the NHL world, the world as a hockey fan is definitely the poorer not having a guy like Joe Pavelski around. There's no doubt about that.
All right. That's our last topic for this week. We are running up to the draft. We've got like probably 2 more episodes for the draft, maybe 3. No, 2.
Too.
And we're gonna be reporting live from the draft as
Hmm.
well. So it's gonna be a great time. But stick around for the Todd Marchant interview. It's if you're into Sharks prospects, which I'm sure a lot of you are, it's a really good interview just
It
to
is
get
a
some
deep, 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 deep dive.
deep cuts there with Todd, and hopefully we'll have him back again. Maybe for our 2-year anniversary. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly.
100th episode with Todd Marchant. All right, guys. Hope you have a good week. Bye.
Bye. For the 50th episode of the new San Jose Hockey Now podcast, we want to welcome back our very first guest. Todd Marchant played over 1,000 games in the NHL and won a Stanley Cup with the Ducks in 2007. He was hired by the Ducks to be their director of player development in 2011. And in 2022, Mike Greer hired him in that same role with the Sharks, along with making him a senior advisor. Welcome back, Todd.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I appreciate it.
Got to ask you first about some of the big news with Sharks prospects. You guys have just signed Will Smith. Congrats on that. Also, you guys won a draft lottery. You guys will likely be picking Macklin Celebrini #1. Got to ask you, do you guys just walk in the office, you and Mike, just walk in the office every day just whistling? Sun is shining in San Jose. Got to feel good, right?
Well, it definitely is. If you're, with the season that we had as a team, the reward, I guess, is to, get that lottery pick, the first overall. And there's still lots of work to be done. We obviously, we have a lot of young players, and there's a lot of expectations that get put on these players, but we have to be patient. And it's going to take some time, but it's nice to have some pieces to work with and to get this ship turned around in the right direction.
These are definitely some outstanding pieces to work with. But today, Todd, we want to focus with you. There's going to be a lot of chatter about Will Smith and about Macklin Celebrini and guys like that over the next year or so. Well deserved for those guys to some of the best prospects in all of the NHL. But we want to focus on some of the under the radar guys for the Sharks, guys that you as the director of player development know better than everybody. And so we're going to run through some of the guys out there, some of the lesser known names. We're going to talk about your Cam Lunds, your Axel Landons, just throwing out a couple of names out there. And we're going to go by draft year, Todd. Just kind of run down whatever you want to say about their year, their progress. And so let's start first with 2023.
And so obviously this guy isn't so under the radar anymore because he had a fantastic season. But how pleased were you with Quentin Musty's improvement this year when he went back to the OHL?
Well, obviously the stats say that he had an excellent season. I mean, his points per game, his total amount of points. There was many weeks during the season where he would put up 10 double digit points in games that week. So from an offensive standpoint, he had a great year. He's a very he's got great puck skills. He's got great vision. And obviously he's got a really good shot. So he was on a Sudbury team that was high offense, and there was about 5 or 6 guys on that team that night after night were putting up big numbers. And we were very happy with the from where he started the season to where he finished. He's got a lot of work to do. There's no question. There's areas of his games that need to improve, but it's I'd rather work on those things with players than have to try and get them to work on other things, because he has something that's you really can't teach, and that's the ability to produce offense. He sees the game well, and we're really looking forward to seeing how he looks coming up this summer at development camp.
There was some talk around the World Junior times that he I don't believe he got an invite to the USA camp. I know it was a very stacked USA team, but is that something that you think is important for his development, if that was to go that route towards the World Juniors for him?
Absolutely. I mean, I think anytime you get a chance to represent your country, it's a tremendous honor, but it's also the best players at their age group, right? So from all different countries. So you get a chance to really stack up against your peers and get to see where you are worldwide, so to speak, not just in the OHL or not just in your little area, but across the world. And we really would like to. It would be a great honor for him, and a great experience for him to be able to play in that tournament.
With Quentin in particular, what does he need to improve and work on?
Well, I think it's his play away from the puck. Offensive players, especially in the OHL, they can. There's a lot of cheating involved, and we've had many conversations with Q with regards to that, and the system that they played was kind of set up for that. It was like, when the puck got turned over, it's like, let's see how fast we can get to the other end of the rink. And a lot of times it was, neglecting what was happening in the defensive zone. Sometimes that puck gets turned over and you're already gone. So those are areas of the game that I think that he needs to improve on, is and his overall compete in some of the battles. We saw it at times where he really wanted to win that battle, and there's other times, he just wanted to look for the easy way out. And that's kind of a thing that happens with a lot of young players. Very few players are dialed in from day one. I mean, those are the elite of the elite players in the National Hockey League, and every other player has something that they need to work on. And that's something he needs to work on, and we're going to continue to work with him on improving that.
Is his development best served by going back there for another year? And, will he be able to kind of improve those things in a level that offensively he's so much higher in? Or could it be better for him to go somewhere else to kind of work on those things?
Well, that's going to be up to him. Every player that, he's signed to a contract, every player that comes into training camp has the opportunity of making the team. What kind of summer is he going to have? Is he going to come in bigger, stronger, faster? Is he going to be a guy that, works on the things that we talked about? Because to play in the NHL, you have to be good at those things all the time. It can't be just one shift here, 2 shifts there, 1 period here, 2 periods there. It's got to be all the time. So it's going to be up to him, and we're going to see where he's at development camp. I know he's taking his off ice training this summer much more serious than he has in the past. He's living in Toronto, and he's hired a personal trainer to work on that stuff. So I think that he's taking the steps in the right direction, and now we'll see what comes of it.
Another interesting OHL prospect who's actually still playing right now in the Memorial
You're
Cup.
the only guy still playing, right?
Is Kasper Halttunen, who is kind of gets a lot of headlines because the guy has like a very, very impressive shot, and he's scoring like highlight reel goals, it seems like, every night. But is there sides to his game that also need to round out in order to become an NHLer as well?
Yeah, I think that you look at Kasper, and the first thing that comes to mind is his shot, right? He's got an NHL quality shot. If you watch any of the highlights, it's not just his ability to shoot the puck when he's got it on a stick, but he's got a great one-timer, and he finds that area kind of like where Ovechkin hangs out or Patrick Laine would hang out, on that dot on the opposite side. And he's able to get it off his stick, and he's very accurate with it. The areas of his game that need to be work on a little bit is he's got to continue to work on his off-ice fitness, conditioning. He's a guy that we talked about earlier this year. Like when he went to the World Juniors, I thought he had some good games and some just okay games, and consistency was a little bit of an issue for him there. And then he went back to London, and he kind of just took off, and he's carried it out through the playoffs. He had a great OHL playoffs with London, and he's continued on in the Memorial Cup. So if he can take what he's really good at now and improve on what he needs to work on, he's got a bright future ahead of him.
Want to ask you also about Brandon Swoboda, actually won a Clark Cup. And what is his next step? I'm not sure if offensively, where you see his game. And also, I know that maybe he projects more to be a two-way kind of guy, but where do you see him?
Well, back-to-back Clark Cup champions. He won last year with Youngstown, and then
Oh,
won
that's
this
right.
year with
Yep.
won this year with Fargo. So it was good for him to get traded out of Youngstown. They were a team that was sort of rebuilding, and he went to another really good team. And he had some injuries that he dealt with this year, but was able to get back into the lineup in the playoffs, and he played very well with them at the end. And Brandon's a big kid. He can skate. He's got very good hockey skills. I think that in the times that I saw him play this year, he played both wing and center. I know that in talking to Jay Pandolfo with BU, they've got him penciled in at center to start next year. So he does play a good 200-foot game. And, he's a guy that just, he's got to slowly just continue to get bigger, stronger, faster. You look at him off the ice. He's got the frame to be able to add to it. But again, these are 18-year-old kids, 19-year-old kids that they don't have the man strength yet. So I think that once we see that, start to materialize for him, the sky's the limit for his game, because he's got everything, all the tools. It's just about adding some muscle mass to his body frame.
Is he a kind of player that you don't focus too much on his scoring or his points at this level at his age right now? You just look at more, like you mentioned, his physical tools, what he can grow into, and his timeline maybe is a little bit more of a project, so you take a little more time with him. But if everything comes together in a couple of years, you might really have a special player.
I think you focus on everything. I mean, even if you have, like, let's go back to Casper, even though you have an elite shot, you're still going to have to keep working on that.
Right.
You're still going to have to continue to improve on the things that you're really good at. And in Brandon's case, obviously, he thinks the game at a high level. He understands the both sides of the game. I would like to see him get involved a little bit more physically in the game. And I think that's going to come when he gets bigger and stronger. I think sometimes when you don't have that muscle behind you, you're maybe a little reluctant to get into some of the battles. I'm not saying that that Brandon's afraid by any means. It's just that having that confidence to say, hey, I've got the strength, I've got the size to be able to go into these battles. And once you have that confidence, then you can battle with anybody.
And next guy, we're kind of going down the draft order, so for each year, by the way, but Cagnoni and Luca Cagnoni had obviously an amazing season with the Portland Winterhawks. I think he scored 90 points. He just signed with the Sharks. Congratulations to Luca. And with Luca, and what happens with him next year? Does he go to the Barracuda? Does he go back to the Winterhawks? Are you guys going to take the same approach that you guys did with Ethan Cardwell in 2022-23, where Ethan was part of Sharks training camp? He even played a preseason game, and ultimately a decision was made that even though Ethan showed well, I think overall in training camp, that he was better suited to go back to Barrie for his overage season. Is that sort of the same kind of process we'll probably go with Luca?
Yeah, and for Luca, the different, for Luca, that's the premise behind him, is that he had a great year with Portland. He thinks the game at an incredibly high level. He sees the play way before other players see it. There was a play earlier this year where the puck was deep in his zone. He knew the guy was coming out of the box. He waited, and then he fired a puck over everybody, landed flat to the guy coming out of the box to the far blue line for a breakaway goal. Like, you can't teach that. And Luca obviously is not. He doesn't have the height. He's 5'9", 5'10", but he's pretty thick. He's strong on his feet. So now it's just about teaching proper body position for someone at his size to be able to play at the professional level. And the plan for Luca is to have him come in and earn a spot on the Sharks, earn a spot on the Barracuda. And if he does, then he stays. And if he doesn't, then he'll go back to junior. And a lot of these situations, it's what they're ready for. And they're the only ones that can show us. And we just sit back and see give them every opportunity to show us that they can or can't. And then, at the ultimate decision is with Mike and the staff to say, okay, he's not ready. He needs to go back to junior and continue to work on his game. Or, you know what? I think this guy should stay and he can help our team. And it's going to be more beneficial for him to stay and play pro hockey in San Jose.
It's another defender that has actually taken, I guess, right after him was Axel Landon with the next pick in 2023. He played majority of the year in the SHL, the Swedish Men's League. He ended up playing 35 games, or at least being rostered for 35 games. Didn't put up any points in that time, but how did you see his progress, and was it just kind of about making that next step to the men's league?
Yeah, Axel's kind of he's a little bit of a different player in a sense that we're probably never going to see him put up big numbers. That's just not his game. Mm-hmm. But he plays hard. He competes. He's a very physical defenseman. And we were actually kind of surprised that he played as many games in the SHL this year. I mean, we kind of thought that he played more games in the junior league than he did. But the coaching staff liked him so much that they kept him. Mm-hmm. And it was great for his development because he got to play against men. And that's the kind of game that he's going to have to play, is play that hard, physical, shutdown type of a defenseman. And it actually kind of put his name was on the radar for the World Junior team for Sweden this year. And he will be a candidate to be on the team next year, or this coming year as well. So he's really taken a huge step forward in his development. I think that the reason for that was having to play at a higher level than playing junior over there. And, he deserves all the credit. He's a hard worker. He's a sponge. Like, he wants more information. He wants to get better. And, the results are that he's taken a huge step in his development.
The next guy after him was Eric Polkamp. Actually, we've got like a trio of defenders coming here. A couple things with Eric Polkamp this year. He had a really good year at Bemidji State, if I'm saying that correctly. And then it decided to enter the transfer portal to DU. And how important was, or what went into that decision, or what you think went into that decision? And also, how important was it for him to make the World Junior Championship roster this year too?
Yeah, he kind of, was I don't want to say a sleeper, but mm-hmm. Our scouts loved him. They really did. They had a lot of passion for him, and when he was available at that pick, they couldn't be happier. And you kind of saw with the way he played this year. He started off strong with Bemidji. Got an invite to the World Juniors for Team USA. Most nights he was kind of the seventh defenseman, so he didn't get a lot of time. But there was a couple games there where I believe it was who was the guy? One of the defensemen got injured mm-hmm. and couldn't play, and he got to step in and play, and he played very well. I think he had 3 points in 7 games. He's got a really good shot. They nicknamed him Big Al in Bemidji after Al McInnes. So so he finished the season with Bemidji on a strong note. They lost in the CCHA final game to Michigan Tech. But the decision for him to move on was, and we supported him in the decision, but ultimately the decision was his. And that happens a lot. A lot of players have to make the decision on their own. We're here to support them and give them the pros and cons of what the decision, but at the end of the day, the decision has to be theirs. He wanted to be challenged more. He just felt like he wanted to be around better players. Denver has a great track record of developing defensemen. Obviously this year they went on and won the national championship. And he's got a chance to go in there and be a really good defenseman for them. So we're really, really happy for him that he had the season that he did, and that he's moving on to an even better program.
Want to ask you now, we're going to a couple forwards to kind of round out the 2023 draft. David Carle is somebody that actually did take a noticeable jump in his production in the USHL. And so what is in store for him? What's he got to work on?
So David came over from Waterloo in the USHL. David is the son of Ken Klee, the longtime defenseman. And David is the youngest of three boys. I think it's three boys, I believe. And he plays the game hard. Like he's a hard nose, in your face type of forward. I think the knock on him early was his skating, but I'll tell you what, this year was not an issue at all. Every time we went and saw him play, he was leading the rush. He was first on the back check. He was in people's faces, and he really moved up the lineup in Muskegon, playing both wing and center. He was. There was some talk about him going to North Dakota this season coming up, but ultimately felt with discussing it with North Dakota and with his family that he would be better served by going back and having another year in the USHL. So that's the plan for him.
Okay.
But he's a guy that really kind of, again, he's a 7th round pick, and he really jumped off the charts this year and has put himself in a great position. He's going to a great, great school at North Dakota, and how they develop players like that. They play that hard-nosed style game, and the future is very bright for David, and he was a great draft pick.
Wrapping off the 2023 draft is Igor Rimashevsky. And Rimashevsky, he didn't play a lot in a KHL, which I know is always kind of a concern in some of the men's pro leagues. I know that was concerned with Casper and the Finnish men's league he was in. And so how is he developing? From what I understand, he's a very skilled player, but he happens to be playing on a very deep, one of the better KHL teams.
Well, he kind of went back and forth between the MHL and the KHL this year. He played some games in the MHL and put up some numbers, and then, kind of dabbled a little bit with the KHL. Didn't get a lot of ice time early in the season. Then they had some injuries, and he kind of stepped through the door. He didn't just put his toe in. He knocked the door down and started to earn a regular spot. Was playing on the third line. Was putting up some points. And then in the playoffs, he even got moved up higher in the lineup into more of a top 6 role because they liked the way he was playing so much. Unfortunately, we didn't have an opportunity to see him play live because of playing over in Russia. But on video and through some of our other scouts that did see him play, we're very happy with the way that he played this year. And the plan is for last year, obviously with immigration, he wasn't able to get to development camp. But we're in the process of trying to get him to development camp this year and actually meet him in person for the first time. So it's always an issue, but we're working through all that, and hopefully we'll get a chance to actually see him in person at the end of June, early July.
And this might be more of a Mike question, but is there any headway in hiring another Russian amateur scout? I know that an amateur scout there kind of dabbles as sort of keeps in touch with the guys there too, having a guy in person there. And so any headway in that, hiring somebody new in that role?
That's like you said, that's a Mike question. That's not a player development question, but I think that our staff has done a fantastic job. Our amateur staff has done a fantastic job in the draft last year, and they're doing the work again this year. And we've got a lot of draft picks, and we're looking forward to seeing what transpires.
But there is sort of that challenge, though, right? In terms of your position of development, of not having a guy there that can, because if we talk about like Landon, right, you have guys in Sweden that can interact. Luca can fly over there too to meet with Axel too if need be for that. But for Russia, example, it's hard, right, for that part of it, the development part of it, because you have just not any way to really interact with some of these players sometimes. I mean, obviously over Zoom, but in person, I mean.
Yeah, it does present an issue. We've got also, like you saw, Nicholas Sundstrom, who is an amateur scout, also does some player development for us. So
right,
when it comes to anybody that would be in Finland or Sweden or anywhere else in Europe, he's got a good pulse on those guys and keeps in contact. But again, with the climate in Russia, it just becomes a little bit more difficult. But we manage how we can, and if the player is, we make sure that every player gets the right amount of attention.
We've officially finished the 2023 draft class. It seemed like a marathon there. Heading over to 2022, San Jose's first round pick was Philip Bistad, who just finished his second year in Sweden, or second year in the SHL. How has his game changed this year versus the prior year? He had a little bit of a decrease in his offensive production, and is he a guy that, since now he's come over to the AHL for the end of this year, might thrive on smaller ice?
Well, we hope so. We definitely saw a glimpse of it at the end of the season. He got into a bunch of games with the Barracuda and was able to put up some numbers. And the one thing you have to remember, over in the SHL, a lot of times those teams, they're it's about the winning, right? They're trying to win a championship. They're trying to stay in that league. They're trying to, and a lot of times the younger players, they're not there necessarily for the development process. Whereas when he comes over to the Barracuda in the American League, that is a developmental league for the NHL. Now, is winning important? There's no question. But Philip moved around from center to wing. Was on a little bit on the power play. Played a pretty pivotal role for Sweden at the World Juniors in a second line center role. Philip is another one of those young men that needs to really work on his off ice conditioning and strength. It's a broken record. I hate to say it. When we have meetings at the end of development camp or the end of the season, I look at these players and I feel like I tell them all the same thing. And you'll wait for that next time you see him to see if it really took hold, like they really understood. And it says, you look at a guy and go, wow, he does look a lot bigger off the ice because it's a direct correlation on the ice. And like I said, I feel like a broken record, but we do tell just about everybody that's what they need to improve on.
And probably the same record for Cam Lund as well. I mean, he had a pretty good jump in his production. He looked pretty good at times and was playing a very high role for Northeastern. But is there, I guess, more to round out for his game, or is it the same thing, just bigger, stronger, faster kind of thing?
Yeah, and he actually has gotten much bigger. He's about 195 pounds. He's a little over 6 foot. He's got great puck skills. We challenged him beginning of this year to be better along the wall, better and more engaged in puck battles. And I'll tell you what, he really took it to heart and he did become much better. His coaching staff noticed it. I know our player development staff, our scouts noticed it. Northeastern had a tough year this year. Last year, they were a really good team. They were one of the best in Hockey East. And then this year, they had a lot of players that either transferred or graduated or signed. So, it was a great opportunity for Cam to kind of be one of the guys, if not the guy. And the same thing is going to happen for him next year. He's going to have a target on his back every time he's going to have to play against BC or BU. We have to shut down Cam Lund. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing to have that responsibility. So, Cam is developing just nicely, and every year he's gotten better at something, and hopefully next year he continues in that progress.
And same kind of question with next second round pick that year as Matthias Havlid, and how is his progress coming along?
Yeah, Matthias had a tough year this year. He was kind of he was away from injury, which was great. He battled a lot of injuries last year. This year was pretty much injury free until the end of the year. He struggled with some confidence issues early in the season. I know that when he went to the U18 tournament in November, it really kind of helped him in that respect. Playing against his peers again, like his own age group, U20 tournament, not U18. And then at the World Juniors, he really played a pivotal role for Sweden in a top 4 defenseman role. Unfortunately, he was injured at the end of the season with a wrist injury. So he wasn't able to come over with Philip and play some games, but the future's bright for Matthias. He's a smart, good skating, puck moving defenseman. And that's what the game is all about. You watch the playoffs nowadays, it's about going back and getting the puck and getting it out of your zone. And players that can do that can have a lot of success in the National Hockey League.
What are you hoping for Matthias next year then? Because you mentioned this year being a little tough. Like what would represent sort of a step up for him next year?
I'd like to see him play a full-time role in the top 4 in the SHL team in Linköping. That's what I would love to see him do that. he hasn't signed a contract yet. We've talked to him and his group about signing a contract, but it just hasn't happened yet. So if he is going to play over in Sweden, we want him to play a more pivotal role, a more important role with the team, and stay there and not be moved around. I think he started there this year early on and then got dropped down, and then he was a seventh defenseman. Then towards the end of the year, he was kind of in and out of the lineup. So it's about being a guy that's a regular guy that can be counted on and to play an important role for that team.
With the rules governing all this, are you guys able to bring him over to play for the Barracuda if you think that's best for his development?
We could have done it at the end of the season. He could have signed an ATO and come over and played. But with the injury, it just didn't make sense. So, those discussions are ongoing, obviously, and he's a very important part of this whole process that we're going through. I mean, you can never have too many defensemen, as you see in the playoffs right now. Good puck moving defensemen, and that's what he's good at. And he's a really good player, and we're really lucky to have him.
But would you project then next year that he starts in the SHL and hopefully grabs that top 4 role early in the season next year? Is that sort of
that looks like the plan, but obviously sometimes these things change. But I think that if he has a good summer training, every year they go through this process. If they put the work in, they get bigger and stronger. And again, I feel like I'm sounding like a broken record, but it is. It's just that's what 99% of all of these young players have to work on.
Yeah, fair enough.
If they do the work, then they'll see the results.
One guy that has had terrible injury luck, another defenseman, is Michael Fisher. And is he, what's he got to do to kind of get back on track? Because this past year, also Northeastern didn't seem like he played as much either. So what's he got to do to get back on track?
Yeah, so he had the injury a year ago, right around, I think it was November. He had a knee injury that when they went in to repair it, it was a lot worse than they thought. Originally, they thought it might only be a couple months and ended up being a 4 to 5 month thing. Came back just before the playoffs started. Kind of was, on the outs there. Obviously, they had a good team that went on to win the whole thing. So he didn't play a lot that season. And then went on to Northeastern. Northeastern, kind of felt like that they had a spot for him. Early in the season, there was a bunch of injuries to the defense corps in Northeastern, and he got to play quite a bit. He was playing, 15, 16 minutes a night. He was gaining confidence. He was, becoming the player that we thought he could be after being drafted where he was. And then those players that with injury came back, so it dropped him down the lineup. And then eventually was, kind of dressed as a seventh defenseman. And then late in the season was more times than not a healthy scratch. So it started out good, and then it kind of didn't finish good. And I know that Michael was very frustrated with the way that all went down. And so I know that we had talked to him and his representation, and the thought process was maybe to go back to the USHL. And play, have a good solid season and then make your way back to the NCAA. The last time I had talked to them, I think they were looking at that option and other options as well. So I don't know where that stands, but we're here to support Michael and Fish and whatever decision that he decides to make.
I guess this is going to be the only drafted goalie that we're going to talk about today. Why do you think it hasn't really worked out so much for Mason Bopit so far in terms of sticking in the WHL and all that?
Yeah, Mason's had a tough go. After being drafted and going to Spokane, and they were getting beat by double digits every night, and he was the goalie, and it wasn't working out. And I know that he had requested a trade, and Spokane traded him to Winnipeg. Unfortunately, he was a guy behind their number one guy and didn't get a lot of time. And then this year, with Winnipeg moving to Wenatchee, he went back to Wenatchee, and they basically said that they didn't have a spot for him. So he ended up going back to the BCHL And just, it's just for some reason he just hasn't taken that next step in his development. And, unfortunately, when you draft these guys out of the CHL, you only have 2 years to sign them,
Mhm.
and,
Yeah.
we had to look, the time is coming up now, June 1st,
Yeah,
June
June
3rd,
1st.
June
Yeah.
1st. Yeah. So that's tomorrow, actually. Um, but
Yeah.
we felt as though that Mason just hasn't taken that next step in his development, and hopefully he can turn his game around and find out where it takes him.
Gotcha. Um, Kind of a guy that we highlighted last year on the podcast, or you had done, was Jake Furlong. Had kind of a interesting year back at Halifax. How has he progressed, and what's the next step for him in terms of where he's going next year, you think?
Yeah, Jake, you know what? Jake recognized the type of defenseman that he's going to have to be. I think that he was a little confused a year ago. He kind of felt like he was, could be an offensive guy. And everybody wants to be an offensive guy. Like, let's face it. But you know what? There's a spot for defensive guys in the league as well. And Jake kind of took it upon himself. And I think that when he got named to Team Canada in more of a shutdown role, I
Hmm.
think it really solidified in his brain that, hey, I could do this. And he was one of the best defensemen for Team Canada this year at the World Juniors. Now, they didn't do as well as they would have liked to, but, he was in a penalty kill role. He was in a shutdown role. He
Yep.
played big minutes. And he went back to Halifax and he just continued to play that way. And it really, being named captain was another great thing for him this year in Halifax. And unfortunately, he suffered a shoulder injury late in the season and had to have surgery. But we saw the progression from the time that we kind of came in, Luca Spiza and myself. We came into this organization and seeing where Jake was to where Jake is today.
Mm.
And that's why we signed him. We looked at it and said, this is a guy that's big, he's strong, he can skate. And if he knows how to shut people down and play defensively with a good stick, those guys are valuable, especially again at this time of the year in the playoffs. So he really took a huge step, and that's the reason why we signed him to a contract.
He's yeah, I really enjoyed watching him at the World Juniors. I felt like he was that kind of shutdown guy and a little bit unexpected, right? Like there was some big names that got let go from Canada, and he was still there, and I thought he played really well.
He did. He really was kind of his coming out party, and not just from what we saw. I mean, there was a lot of people over there. I mean, every team has 4 or 5 guys, and I can't tell you how many people say, "Hey, that Jake Furlong is really playing well." So it wasn't just our validation; it was validation around the league that other teams were noticing that this kid has really taken a big step.
Are you excited to see him for the Barracuda next year? Unfortunately, he got hurt, so you couldn't see him at all. Give him a little taste last year of pro hockey. But is he a guy that maybe can take on maybe a big role for the CUDA this coming year?
I just hope that he's this obviously this surgery was a substantial one, but I think he's with his work ethic and his dedication and to details and his focus off the ice. I think he's going to come out of it bigger, stronger than he was when he went in. And you know what? We're just going to take it one step at a time with him. Obviously, we want him to continue to play the role that he has. We don't want him to try and do something that he's not. And if he can continue to develop that way, he becomes a very valuable asset to this organization. And by the way, he does play both sides, which is unusual for defensemen. Usually it's, if you're a left shot, you play the left. If you're right,
Hmm.
you play the right. He played most of the year on the right side,
Mm.
which is very difficult to play your offside for a defenseman. So that's another asset that he has to his game.
With his injury, will he be ready for development camp, or will he be ready by training camp? All for
He won't be ready for development camp. He'll be
Mhm.
there. We're bringing everybody in, but he will be. He is on schedule to be ready for rookie camp.
Okay, awesome.
Love it. We're gonna round out the end of the 2022 draft with a trio of NCAA guys. We've got Joey Muldowney, Eli Barnett, and Reese Laubach. Any thoughts on them or anything you want to highlight from their seasons?
Yeah, so Joey went into UConn, kind of earned his spot as a fourth line guy. And I give him credit because, he's not the biggest guy, but he worked hard and competed. He was doing what the coaches asked him. And they said, we want you to be reliable defensively. Can you make the right play in your own zone? Can you make the right play through the neutral zone? And he did that for the first, I would say, 15 games of the year. And the coaches recognized that, and they moved him up in the lineup. He got power play time. He got penalty kill time. He was playing, 15, 20 minutes a night for UConn. So he really took a big step in his development that way. So now next season, can he start where he finished and then produce? That's going to be the next thing for him. So he really did have a good year in that respect. And, we're looking forward to seeing him continue to develop as well. Reese Laubach is another player, obviously a local San Jose kid. Went to Penn, was committed to Mankato, and then when the coach left, was able to get released and signed with Penn State. Went into Penn State just like kind of Joey Muldowney. Went in as a fourth line guy, worked hard, competed, and then got on the kid line. There was 3 young players that all of a sudden started to drive the bus for the team offensively, and he was a big part of it. He plays a 200-foot game. And he really took his game to another level this year as well. So it'll be interesting to see how he starts next year. Does he, again, start where he left off and continue to produce and be that reliable two-way guy? Because he really did was a big part of Penn State's success this year. And then Eli Barnett, came over from Victoria in the BC Junior League to Vermont. Eli struggled early in the season, was kind of in and out of the lineup. I think that the one thing for him is that, he needs to play to an identity. And I think at times he does, and other times he doesn't. He's 6'6", 230 pounds, a big man, and he needs to play like that. When you're that size, you can't teach that. So if you can play big and play that strong defensive type of a game, and he's very mobile for a big guy. So that's another plus for him. So again, it's his freshman year. It's always difficult to kind of work your way in, but we'll see what kind of step he takes next year.
All right. Well, we've wrapped up the 2022 draft there. And Todd, we really appreciate your time here. In respect to that, we're going to finish up the 2 more drafts here, but we're just going to focus on the non-Barracuda prospects just to kind of rush through it because there's so many prospects you guys have and much deeper pool than in previous years. So a lot of things to talk about. But let's go to 2021. And Keegan, you got a question about Jakobsen?
Yeah, Theo, Jakobsen or Jacobson. I actually don't know if it's Jakobsen or Jacobson.
Oh yeah, what is it?
We just call him Theo.
Oh, that
works. He had a really a big jump, right, when he went to the Allsvenskan. Any specific plans for him for next year, or what's the because he was in that COVID or COVID adjacent year, so it's kind of maybe not a lost prospect, but somebody who hasn't talked about a lot. So any thoughts on his development plan for the future?
Yeah, Theo took a big step this year. He started to produce a little bit. He got to play, in the Allsvenska League, and I think that the plan is for him to play an even bigger role next year in Allsvenska, which is the league, one league down from the SHL. So, he continues to take strides in the right direction. So, we'll see where that takes us next season.
Love it.
And go ahead.
No, you're fine, Sheng. Go ahead.
Okay. Wrapping off this draft, at least the non-Barracuda, non-Sharks guys, you have Kazhnikov, who actually plays quite a bit in the KHL, is a regular defenseman for his team. Where do you kind of see him? Is he a guy that might come over at some point, or where do you see Kazhnikov?
Yeah, so he played over in the KHL. Had a kind of a up and down year. I would say that you look at his statistically, he didn't have as good a year this year as he had last year. But he's a big man, and his skating has improved. So he's going to be at development camp as well. So we're looking forward to seeing him.
Okay.
Yeah, just again, another guy that's a kid in Russia that we don't get a chance to see as often as we would like. But
right,
we'll see him at development camp coming up in July.
Is that his first time over here? I'm trying to recall if he was here in past years.
He was here last year. He came last year.
Okay.
And then he'll be here this year. I don't know if he had been there in years past.
Okay, great. Well, that covers the 2021. So 2020 should be quick too. I want to ask you about Alex Young, and you guys have a decision on Alex Young. Just where is he at, and are you guys going to sign him?
So Alex transferred from Colgate to Arizona State. He felt as though that was going to be, the right spot for him. One of the assistant coaches from Colgate left as well and went to Arizona State. Unfortunately for Alex, it didn't work out for him. He had a tough year this year. I mean, he had 20 some goals a year before in Colgate. Right. This year, it was a struggle. He struggled to stay in the lineup. He struggled to, find a role for himself in that respect. Therefore, we informed Alex that, we weren't going to be tendering him a contract. I know he's played some games in the East Coast League in Adirondack at the end of the season.
Yep.
But, we wish Alex all the best.
Ask you about another guy there too, NCAA guy who is, I think, coming up on a decision with him is a Spitzerov.
Yeah, Timothy's at Vermont. His first couple years, he kind of was moved all over the lineup, and then obviously with the coaching staff change, kind of was more of a solidified in his third line role with some power play time and put up some numbers this year, more so than he has in the past. So it'll be an interesting year, his senior year this year, what his game looks like. It's a big year for him. So hopefully he can continue to improve his game and force our hand into doing something.
And actually, sorry, is he also coming to development camp as well?
He will not be coming to development camp. Okay. He's been to, I think, 3 or 4 already. So we usually try and say, you know what, once you've been to that many, that's enough.
I want to ask you about one CUDA guy on this 2020 list, just because there's a decision that has been made about him. Brandon Coe, can you say anything about him, whether he will be qualified or anything like that?
Brandon, I'll tell you, I give Brandon a lot of credit because, here's a guy, he's a big man, he's good skates, he's got great skills, he looks the part. And for whatever reason, he hasn't had the success I think that he would have liked. Coming from junior where he had the big numbers, he hasn't had the success offensively that he would have liked. It was interesting when we had our exit meeting with him because all along we've been telling him that what you do in junior is junior. What you have to do in pro is you have to adapt and you have to do things a little bit different. Doesn't mean that we're telling you to change your game, but you got to add things. And the one thing we've asked Brandon Coe to do is be involved physically. Like you can't just play the game on the perimeter. You got to get inside. You got to go to the dirty areas, and you will produce. And he was very reluctant. And it was funny in his exit meeting. He was like, I just thought I could do what I've always done in junior, and that's what I did. I could score from the outside. People would give me I didn't have to. And he goes, it just wasn't happening. And finally, I had a meeting with the coaching staff. It was probably like around in January, February, and he goes, for whatever reason, I said, let me just try it your way. And sure enough, he started to produce. He's like, I never thought it would correlate, but he goes, I started to produce by just getting to those areas. And he goes, it was just like a light bulb went off. So for me, like, I'm glad that he recognized it. Hopefully he can continue to develop and improve and become the player that we think he can be, because he does have all the tools.
Okay. So are you going to bring him back then? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I believe that's the plan.
Okay.
But these things, contracts and all these things kind of get in the way, but he's a player that definitely took a step in the second half of the season this year.
All right. Well, that's great news. Good to hear. And just to close off here, just a couple of guys that are non-Sharks drafted prospects and kind of away from the Barracuda. The big one, of course, is David Edstrom, who you guys acquired in the Tomas Hertl trade. And everyone, when you talk about Edstrom, there's the comparisons to Bjugstad. They were drafted a year apart from each other, big Swedish centers. But just where do you see his game? And is that kind of an apt comparison with Bjugstad, or is that maybe too easy, too lazy?
No, I mean, every player has their own qualities and their own abilities. And when we made the trade with Thomas, obviously David was a guy that we had to have in the trade.
Right.
He's a guy that you watched him at the World Juniors. He was a Swiss Army knife for that team, kind of played all over the place. He's just a really good, smart 200-foot centerman. And you can never have enough of those guys. I think that, he's a player that it just continues to improve. He had a great second half of the year over in Sweden. And then, had a really good playoff. So, I'm really looking forward to, I haven't met him yet. We've only talked on the phone, but really good. Looking forward to meeting him at development camp and just getting to know him a little bit better. And, but we're really excited with where he's at in his development.
And is the plan likely for him to just remain with his team, his SHL team next year?
I believe that's the plan, but again, these plans change. You never know if all of a sudden he comes in and
Right.
earns a spot with us. Who knows? I mean, these things can change in a heartbeat. It all depends on where the player's at and what they're capable of.
And I want to close off with one guy. We get asked about him a little bit. He's maybe more. He's a Shark. He's a Sharks guy. He played with the Sharks in the season. But just your everyone's impression of Colin Graff in his brief NHL time, and is he kind of earmarked kind of for the Sharks next year, maybe for the Barracuda next year? Just where do you guys see all that?
Well, I got to see Colin in the NCAA tournament
Right.
there, and super smart player, high hockey IQ. Very good puck skills, is always like a step ahead at the game in the game. And then he came over, signed as a free agent and got to play some games. And as far as where he's earmarked for next year, it's again broken record, but it just depends on, and it goes for everybody. I mean, there's some guys that obviously on the Sharks that have contracts and, they can't go to the Barracuda or whatever, but he's a guy that, who knows? Maybe if he comes in and lights it up in training camp, he stays with the Sharks, and maybe he doesn't, and he needs some time in the American League. Maybe he does, and then eventually ends up in the American League. I don't know. I mean, it all depends on him and how he looks in training camp, and see what the coaching staff is looking for from him. But we're really happy to have another player like that in the fold, and you start adding all these pieces and all these assets to the organization, and the future looks really bright.
And based on what you saw from him in the NCAA and with the Sharks, what does he need to work on this summer? Is it the same broken record, bigger, stronger, faster?
I think his skating is the one area of his game that really needs to improve. And, can it improve with getting bigger and stronger? Yes, because the bigger and the more powerful your legs are, the faster you're going to go. I think that, looking at his technique, maybe a little bit that we can sort of tweak some things, but I think when you have the brain, you're able to go to places a lot easier than having to, if you can't think the game. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like he's already a step ahead. Everybody talks about Wayne Gretzky. He wasn't a great skater, but he had the brain, right? So he was already 3 steps ahead of everybody else. And that's why he was so successful. So, there's one thing in this game that I have yet to learn, or that you can teach, is that hockey sense. I have yet to find somebody that says I can teach you to be a smarter hockey player. I have yet to find that. If someone can ever give that to me, I'm really looking forward to hearing that, because it's a really hard thing to teach.
Todd, thank you so much for your time. Real quick, I know we've covered a lot of people. Is there anybody that you have any specific thoughts on that you wanted to share from this past year, or any prospect that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, tough question.
It's a big list,
Really,
right?
really put me on the spot.
Big list. Anybody?
Yeah. No, I think we've covered everybody. I mean, I really think that, we're in a good place. I mean, it was a tough year for the Sharks and the Barracuda, but I think that the more pieces that you keep adding to this puzzle, you start to put it together. I really believe that the future is very bright for this organization. And I'm really looking forward to being a part of that process, because, it's a great journey. And when you can see these young players that we talked about at 18, 19, and then at, 22, all of a sudden 23, they're getting a chance to play their first game. If they continue to develop, it's a great reward for myself and my staff and the entire organization, because you feel like you had a little piece of their development. And we're really looking forward to seeing who's the next person to take that next step. And last year we saw, Eki take a huge step in his development. We saw Muck take a huge step in his development. Henry Thrun took a huge step, being kind of guys that were, played a bunch of games. Thomas Bordeleau took a big step. Obviously, hopefully Goosh takes that next step next year. So it's like, these are all these guys that you see that, are kind of maybe a little bit ahead of what we talked about, but can they take that next step? Can they take that next step of being everyday NHL players? And that's a very big step, and it's a tough thing to do.
Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Todd. Well, really appreciate the time here and its update on all these guys in the system. And best of luck. Bet you guys are going to have a very good draft there. So we'll have some exciting guys to talk about next year.
Sounds like a plan.
Thanks so much, Todd.
Thanks, guys.